Designed to be the smallest possible airframe to be mated with the 2,250 horsepower R2800 radial engine, the Chance Vought Corsair was ordered in such great numbers that its production had to be subcontracted out to various companies, among them Goodyear Aircraft. Before being modified and accepted for carrier use, the Corsair was assigned to Marine squadrons in the South Pacific, where it would soon prove itself to be as tough as the Marines who flew it. The fighter bomber excelled not only in air-to-air combat, it proved to be a devastatingly accurate ground attack airplane. Japanese ground troops nicknamed the Corsair Whistling Death. It would prove its worth in Korea as well, serving as an especially effective close air support platform. The Cavanaugh Flight Museum's FG-1D Corsair 4 was originally built by Goodyear for the Royal Navy, but when the order was canceled towards the end of the war, it was added to the U.S. Navy inventory. It's painted in the markings of the Corsair flown by Major Archie Donahue when he served with VMF 211 at Guadalcanal in 1943. Donahue is one of only 7 Marine pilots to destroy 5 aircraft in one engagement. He would end the war with 14 aerial victories. The Cavanaugh Flight Museum, located just north of Dallas, Texas, is one of the nation's premier aviation museums and a frequent contributor to Warbirds in Review. Jim Cavanaugh, the museum's founder, and Doug Janes, the museum's director, will tell us, in their own words, what it took to restore this iconic warbird.
We are very fortunate today. The airplane of the day is, I hate to say this with my wife in the audience perhaps, but this is my girlfriend, always has been. I love the Corsair. If you have to have one airplane, that's the one I would have to fly. It's really great. But we do have this beautiful example of an early model Corsair from the Cavanaugh Flight Museum, which is at Addison Airport in Dallas, Texas. If you ever get a chance, don't miss it. Jim Cavanaugh has put together a marvelous program of education, and he's done great. And his executive director is with us today, Doug Janes. Doug, we'll turn it over to you, and then we'll talk a bit about Corsairs.
Okay, sure will. Thanks, Bill. This is also Stuart Milson. He's our chief pilot, so he's going to talk about it a little bit. We want to sit down? All right, we'll do that.
I'm old.
Well, just talk a little bit about the markings on it first, because as Bill said, it's made up as an early model. Kind of the history of the airplane, in the 50s or so, it was surplused out, and a fellow bought 2 of them for $2,500 from the government, and kind of messed around with them. They sat a lot, and then another guy got them, and in the late 60s, he had some young guy, 24, that wasn't young compared to most pilots at that time, but fly it for the first time back from an air show, and he took off without the tail wheel being locked, and I've done that before, but it's not fun. But
it's a wild ride.
It's a wild ride. It wasn't bad on takeoff, it was the landing that was wild, but that's when I realized it. But anyway, rolled it up in a ball, and it sat for a long time. Another fellow picked it up, Harry Doan actually, got it, and went looking for a set of wings and found what we always thought were Dash 5 wings. There's a Dash 5 sitting out here. It has the 20 millimeter cannons on it, but in actuality these are Dash 4B wings. So the Dash 4 actually had, the B model had the 20 millimeter cannons. Well, back in the early years with the Corsair, the F4U, they built a 1C model, and the C had 20 millimeter cannons. The difference was the barrels stick out far. If you look at this one compared to the Dash 5, the barrels are sticking way out. So when we were doing our last restoration on it, decided to do something a little different since it didn't have the right wings to begin with. So we extended the barrels out to make it look like a 1C. So if you're looking at it and say 1C, what is that? That's how it's done.
Quick question for you.
Sure.
Did the 1C have metal covered aft section of the
No,
wing?
it still had the fabric.
had the fabric?
Still had fabric,
Okay.
like the earlier ones. So going back through the history of the airplane, so it kind of came along. A guy named Charles Arsburn bought it, restored it through the years, and then a fellow in Louisiana named David Johnson bought it and had it down in Lafayette. And I met David sometime in the 90s, and at ICAS, which is an air show convention, and David asked me, he said, "Doug, would you like to fly the Corsair?" And I said, "Sure." So I ran into him a few months later, and he said, "Hey, you ever going to fly my Corsair?" And I said, "Well, golly, I didn't know you were serious. I just thought that was an awful nice offer." So Alan Henley, who's with the Aeroshell team, kind of headed it up. He checked me out in it, and that was a lot of fun. It's a great airplane to fly. So we flew it around for a while, and then Mike Burke, who flies a lot of Corsairs for different people, was taking it to an air show. I'm going to back up, because David Johnson sold it to Paul Morgan out of England. So I took it down to Florida for Paul to fly it and ride in it, and I got to meet him and his wife, and just had a great weekend with them all. He bought it, took it over to Europe, and he was killed in a Sea Fury accident. So his wife called me up and said, "Doug, Paul really enjoyed flying with you. This has a back seat. Enjoyed flying with you. Knew how much you loved the airplane. You know, since he's gone, we're going to sell the airplane. We'd really like for you to have it." Well, I wasn't in any kind of way to be able to buy it, so talked to Mr. Cavanaugh. Mr. Cavanaugh got it, brought it over, and rebuilt it, or finished it up, painted it, got it going. And Mike Burke was flying it to an air show. We had an oil cooler split. Well, the oil cooler, as you can see, is in the leading edge of the wing. Well, the oil goes out, you can't see it. It's just kind of out of sight. So just all of a sudden, the engine ran away, seized up. He did a great job putting it into a plowed field. So we brought it back, started rebuilding it. So since we were going to repaint it, we decided to come up. That's when we decided to make it into the sea, and repainted it. So Archie Donahue was an ace in a day, twice in Corsairs, once in Guadalcanal, which with the VMF 112, which is how it's painted, and then later on the Bunker Hill. And so I met Archie again back in the late 70s, early 80s, and he helped me. He was with the CAF. He was head of operations, and he kind of took me under his wing and taught me a lot of things. And it was 10, 15 years later that I realized that he was an ace or famous or anything. I didn't know. He was just a great guy. So I wanted to honor him. So we painted it up to in his markings. He came out, got in the airplane, and we just had one engine problem after another, and it took us about 6, 7 years to finally get up and flying. And Archie passed away in the meantime, but we have it there as an honor to him. I don't know if any of y'all have gotten the latest Warbird Digest, but there's a great article all about the airplane, and it just came out. Ought to be on sale somewhere. But so we've had it now up and going for 3 or 4 months. Got some time on it. It is on the rides program. It's the only Corsair, I think, right now that's available to do rides. So if you've got that on your bucket list, that's an airplane to.
You have a back seat, don't you?
It has a back seat, and it's on the FAA rides program, so we're able to do rides with it.
That's really great. That was one of the limitations of the single-seat airplanes like the Corsair, was that you couldn't share it with anybody. And it's one of those airplanes you really want to share because it's just such a superb flying machine.
It's wonderful to fly. It's, I guess all three of us know, and a couple others, but it's a lot of fun. It's actually fairly. I think it's kind of easy compared
Easier
to most
than a T6.
Warbirds. I think it is. I don't know.
think so too.
But just got to get over the long nose on it, and one of the little odd things about it, I guess, is because of the long nose, it's got a lockable tail wheel. So on landings, when the tail wheel touches down, wherever the nose is pointed, that's where it's going to go. So that's sometimes it'll give you a little jolt, but it's got plenty of rudder to get it back.
Yeah, okay. It's an honest airplane.
Yeah, it really is.
Yeah,
flies great.
What are the major differences, would you say, between this airplane and I know we've got an F4U-4 and an F4U-5. The only other one that I know of that we don't have is an F4U-7. We don't.
Right.
There's
There's only a couple of those around.
Yeah.
I think.
The 7 was the last model. They built the. How long did they build Corsairs?
Well, up into the 50s. So
I think
late
52
50s. Yeah.
or,
I think it might have been a
might
little
have
later
been
because they built
later.
them for the French. Do you know that, Stuart? Okay. Yeah, they started building for the French. They did the. I was like an oddball deal, like an A7 or something kind of weird number. But the main difference is the F4U-1 and the FG-1D, which are the same. That was kind of the earlier model. Chance Vought designed and built the airplane, and then they wanted to move on to a couple other things and make different models, but they contracted with Goodyear to build the -1 model. Well, because they were under contract, they couldn't make any modifications or changes to it. So Goodyear only made the -1 model,
Right.
as the FG-1D, which was for Goodyear.
When did they get away from the birdcage canopy? The early F4U-1s had a multifaceted canopy that was a little hard to see out of.
It was hard to see out of, and that was one of the things, as we know, that with that in the landing gear, coming aboard carrier, they had a hard time seeing the carrier. The earlier landing gear tended to bounce, and they'd miss the cable, so they had a lot of problems. So they gave them over to the Marines to fly off the islands. But the D model had the bubble canopy and made it a little easier to see out of. They raised the seat up a little bit and put a lot more forgiving landing gear on it. When Alan was checking me out, and he said, you can't do a bad landing in it.
Oh.
And,
You can prove him wrong.
well, yeah, you can. But the gear, I've always watched guys land. If you watch Corsairs land, the wheels just touch down and just squeak on kind of usually. And the gear gives so much that when you're watching an airplane land, you only look at its wheels. You never look at the airplane. But the wheels can be on the ground. The airplane can be going all over the place, but the wheels don't leave the ground. And that's what happens a few times. I had one pretty hard landing in it, stalled it just a few feet off the ground, and kind of slammed it in, thought this is it. And there's probably as many people as you standing there, some fly-in going on at the airport. That's what kind of got me a little uptight. I only had about 5 hours in it. And I thought, I'm rolling it into a ball right in front of all these people. And next thing I knew, I was just rolling down there, and everybody came out and said, that was the greatest landing I ever saw. So should have been in here.
How many pilots are here? How many of you are pilots? Mm-hmm. Then you know what the shock struts are on the gear. And if you'll look at these and you don't know what you're looking at, you'll think that these need to be pumped up because you don't see any polish. And in almost every hydraulically cushioned landing gear, you see polished struts. In Corsair, you better not put enough nitrogen in it to show a polished strut, or you're in trouble.
Right. Yeah, this has kind of a orifice chamber type mechanism in there that as it absorbs, it doesn't come back. It just keeps taking everything it has and just slowly kind of comes down and settles down on the gear. So that's what gives you that nice little touchdown, typically. So I'm going to let Stuart talk about flying it. He's our chief pilot and does our check rides in-house and flies just about everything we have. So Stuart, you want to talk about it a little bit?
Well, first off, I'm honored to get to fly the airplane. I'm very partial to the Corsairs. Been fortunate to fly most of the World War II fighters, and the first fighter I checked out in was the CAF Corsair, which is also an FG-1D. And flown 5 different airframes, flown the 4s and the 5s, and these early model airplanes, in my opinion, fly the best. It's like a Bonanza or a Cessna. They're the lightest of the ones. They're very quiet. The exhaust, if you see, goes underneath the airplanes. Where on the 4s and the 5s, it's on the side, and very nice airplane. On the landing, the one thing that you do have to watch out for is if you look at when the wings are down in a crosswind, you always have air under the wing. So it can get squirrely, and the uncomfortable part of it is like they've said, the wheels are on the ground, but a wing will start to rise up, and it can get ugly quick. Bill, what model did you fly?
I've flown the 4s, 5s, and FG-1Ds just like you. I agree with you. I think the FG-1D is far and away the most pleasant airplane to fly. and it just doesn't have any bad vices except one, that the updraft carburetor.
Right.
And I had a nice fire one day, and one of my friends was standing out there as a fire guard. When you start a radial engine, you'll see somebody standing out there who's supposed to be knowledgeable and who has a fire extinguisher. That's the way you're supposed to do it. Well, I had my friend out there with a fire extinguisher standing there. The one thing I didn't have was a knowledgeable friend. And I saw smoke coming as I was turning it over, and so I leaned away from my microphone and said, is it on fire? And he said, yeah. And that's all there was to it. Use the damn fire extinguisher. So, but they did change. Most of the others are a different carbureted system.
I've flown one of those. Actually, I delivered one. I picked one up with that updraft carburetor from California, and ended up going all the way across the United States into Canada with it. And of course, it broke several times along the way. But I was just petrified because I talked to guys about a fire, and knock on wood, I was able to make it all the way without doing it. But when I delivered the airplane, it's kind of comical. They had that thing on fire. I mean, the first 2 or 3 days, I mean, we were all out there trying to start it, and but they figured it out, and they're doing great with the airplane.
Well, it's supposed to start quick. It just sometimes doesn't do that. These airplanes were used by a number of Middle American, South American, whatever you want to call it, countries in their rebellion. And one I had a bullet hole in it, and I never patched it because it was my only proof that it was a true war veteran. But it's really one of those great airplanes that you just can't help but smile when you climb in it. I'll tell you just a quick story. A lot of these were flown by the Marines for the simple reason that the gull wing and the big engine and made it where they were scared of flying it on the boat initially, until they learned how to do it and made a few changes in procedures. But if you see Marines who are on Guadalcanal, if you ever talk to one, they'll look at that airplane and say, it saved my what. And they really, I had one at the Tahlequah fly-in in Tulsa, and there was an older Marine there. There are no ex-Marines, as I'm sure, and no apology to any Marine, but he was very feeble, and I said, would you like to get in the cockpit? You don't do that because people can push the wrong button at the wrong time, but I thought it'd really be nice if he could get there since it saved him. And he said, well, I'm too feeble. I just scared to get up there. I said, well, we can lift you up there. He was reluctant. I said, well, would you like to see it fly? And I wasn't scheduled to fly it. So I decided I would fly it for him. And I took off, and I mean, the tears were streaming down his face. It was just, it's unbelievable how they feel, how the grunt land-based Marines who are on Guadalcanal or Okinawa feel about Corsairs. They love them.
Yeah, they all do. Everybody that's ever flown a Corsair loves it. Archie, as I said, was ace in the day twice with Corsairs. He ended up with 14 kills altogether. And he loved the airplane. He talked about it a lot. We got him up in there, and it was the same type of deal. We had his family there, took family shots. There's a photo in this article of Archie and I sitting by it, or Archie in it, and he was really a really neat guy. Y'all were talking about the carburetors. Originally, they had an updraft carburetor, 2800 Pratt & Whitney. Most of them, this one and most others, have been converted to a CB series engine, which is a transport engine, has a downdraft carburetor. So that's the difference we were talking about. So you can imagine a lot of airplanes, civilian airplanes, have updraft carburetors, but on these, you flood them. Basically, you see the guys out there with their thumbs, and the thumb down means you're wet, thumbs up you're dry. So you prime it until fuel comes out, that's thumbs down, and then you start the ignition and all, and it should start until it's dry. But with the updraft, because you're trying to suck fuel up and gravity's trying to pull it down, if you don't get it turning quick enough or don't get things going right, it's real easy to flood it, and then all the fuel come out on the ground. And Stuart was talking about being scared of having a fire, but he came through with that one. He was taking to Canada into Addison and had it out there, and one of our younger mechanics was out there starting him and didn't realize the difference between the updraft and the downdraft, and he did get a little fuel, and it just caught just for a second and just scared the hell out of him because he'd never seen anything like that.
Let's ask that. There's one typical question about Corsairs. Why does it have inverted gull wings? What's your understanding?
My understanding was, for the prop clearance.
For what?
The prop clearance.
Well, they put longer gear on a Bearcat, and it has the same big engine, and they didn't put the gull wing. What's your understanding? There is a lot of disagreement as to why.
What I understood was that Hamilton originally designed this new prop. They had to have a bigger engine to turn it, so they came up with the 2800. Then they needed an airplane that was big enough to take it, and with the longer gear with a straight wing, it was too gangly to be on a carrier, so they decided to invert the gull, or invert the wing into the inverted gull wing, so that it had the struts were shorter, so that they wouldn't bounce as much and have more clearance.
That's probably true. I don't know. There's been an argument ever since there were Corsairs, but one of the other advantages is that if you'll look at a point where the wing attaches to the fuselage, it's a right angle attachment, which is the lowest drag. If there's an angle to it on the where it attaches to the fuselage, it produces higher drag. So it did gain something. It gained ground clearance. It gained reduce in friction, and so it worked out well, I think.
I think it made it fly really good for sure.
Yeah.
Even at slow speeds, high speeds, it just flies great.
Have you ever flown against a Mustang?
I haven't. You flown? Yeah, I'm sure you have. Here we go.
How did you do?
Well, I mean, if I'm gonna have a low fight, I want to be in this airplane right here, because if you look at the wing, it's a very thick wing, and this airplane was built for the low fight. I definitely take this airplane over a Mustang on a low.
Yeah, you just have to challenge him to a time to climb contest. That's the only way. Set it at 5,000 feet, and you're going to win every time. So, have we got questions from the audience? Yes. The wooden ailerons.
It does have wooden ailerons. I really don't know a lot about the development of it. I know they're a pain to try to restore. There's a few guys that do it, and it's really intricate. It's not just a piece of wood. There's a lot of little pieces and parts in there, and they're kind of difficult. So there's a few guys around that make them and rebuild them. So. I'm sure it was just trying to make it light, trying to make it war essential materials and all that, cut down on the metal. They originally had fabric wings, fabric panels. I think a couple of the one right here. If you look at it, the wing panels are fabric. You can see the stitching in there, and later they went to metal. But I've never really heard a good reason for that. But I just know it's not just a simple aileron. It's pretty intricate.
Other questions? Yes. I can't. Where's my Danny? You around?
I'll go over
here.
I'll let Stuart talk about it. Torque. It's asking about torque on a go around.
Oh, okay.
Well, really, this is one of the better airplanes if you're going to have a go around in. If you look at the vertical on this, a lot of people don't realize, but there's very little stationary vertical fin, and the whole rest of the thing is rudder. And I've had a situation where I've needed that rudder. What'll kill you is a Mustang. Look at a Mustang's rudder, and a go around in a Mustang is much more dangerous than a go around in this airplane, and it's because you've got all that rudder back there.
More questions?
Over there.
3 blades versus 4 blade prop.
Well, as they developed and got bigger, they could make a bigger prop and built more horsepower engines. and needed a bigger prop, so they couldn't go any longer on the blades, so they went to 4 blades. So the Dash 4 has 4 blades, the Dash 5 had 4 blades, but the earlier ones had 3 blades.
Also supposedly smoother.
Yeah, the more blades you have, the smoother it's going to be, and it's better for higher altitude with more blades.
Dan, you have a...
I do. What's your question?
What's the cruising speed?
Cruising speed.
Well, I'll tell you, this is the first fighter to achieve 400 miles an hour in level flight. Is the Corsair. Obviously, we don't typically fly them like that, but it's a great cross-country airplane. Just to compare it to the Mustang, guys our size, it's a huge cockpit. There's plenty of places to put everything. It's really comfortable. Normally, we'll see, over 200 knots over the ground, the way we fly them and the power settings we use.
The 400 miles an hour was at 30,000 feet, as I recall.
Yeah, it was way up there. Of course, you burn a lot of gas. You can go faster than, like Stuart was saying, but you're going to burn a lot more gas. I got a
10-mile range without drop tank.
There you go. Got kind of a funny story. I was flying this one down to Florida, and I was going by Pensacola, and of course I called in as Goodyear 451 Fox Golf, and I was talking to Pensacola, and an older controller was on there, and he said, what kind of Corsair are you? And I said, well, I'm Goodyear built. And I had a hell of a tailwind. I was doing 330 knots or so across the ground. I was really screaming along. And he goes, Goodyear, huh? I said, yeah. He goes, you a blimp? I said, have you ever seen a 300-knot blimp? He goes, no. I said, God. But I thought being Pensacola, this guy probably knew his airplanes. He asked me which type it was. So.
More questions? Danny, you see some? Over.
Yeah. Go ahead. Fuel burn cross country.
Kind of optimum's about 80 gallons an hour. You can push it up. That's where we were staying, at kind of a good economy cruise.
Economy, 80
economy
gallons
cruise,
an hour.
80 gallons an hour.
You need a really big credit card to own a Corsair.
Right. Yeah, if you push it up, takeoff power, it's 250, 260 gallons at takeoff. So, as soon as you get the gear up, get it cleaned up and everything, you're going to come back on the power, try to get it, climb, it's about 130, 140, is that about right? Yeah, somewhere around there. So you want to get it back to cruise as quick as you can.
More questions?
Yeah, right here.
In World War II, the Hellcat had a kill ratio of around, I think, 16 to 1. This had 11 to 1, I think. Yet at the end of the war, the Navy kept producing these, and these went on to fly in Korea. Why not the Hellcat?
Oh, no problem. Sorry. I really don't know for sure. My thoughts are this could carry a lot more. It carry bombs or rockets, things like that. Or the Hellcat, I don't believe could. You've flown both. I haven't. Does that sound right to you? Yeah. Okay. Yeah, I think the Hellcat was purely a fighter, and this is more of a fighter bomber. And with that, one of the interesting things on the landing gear on the later models, the Dash 4s and Dash 5s, is the am I going to lose it here? The main gear are actually a dive brake. And you have a setting on the gear handle on the 4s and 5s that you go to dive brake and the main gear come out, but the tail wheel doesn't. So you can just put it in a straight nose down dive and the mains will come out, act as a dive brake and for bombing. So.
Next question.
I got a guy over here. Excuse me.
Split yourself, Danny.
Is the pin titanium, and is there a G limit for the pin?
I don't know of any limit for the pin itself. I'm sure there is, but the G limit on it's 9. 9, yeah. 9 positive. So.
Next.
Go ahead.
It's how you get up.
Are there any F4U-5s still flying?
Yeah, there's one right over here. There's one.
It doesn't have the radar dome on it, I don't believe, and That's the way you expect to see a 5 is with the radar on it.
Did you fly one? I would like to talk to you after the program, please.
Well, you ought to come down here and talk. So.
That just you know, since he brought it up, how many veterans do we have? I'd like all the veterans to stand up at this point and be recognized. Any war, anytime, anywhere. Thank you very much. That's the reason we do this, is to honor you guys and what you did.
Absolutely. It's a lot of fun with all these airplanes to bring them out and have the veterans, somebody come out and show their family, this is an airplane I flew, or this is one I worked on. You know, I was the prop mechanic or armorer or whatever. That's makes it all worthwhile.
And that's the point I was trying to make with the reenactors. That, you know, during war, I think it was 9 support people for each person who was in combat. And it's that's the way it is. There were a lot of people who worked their tails off day and night keeping these things going.
Well, that's just the mechanics and all.
Yeah.
There was a study done I read not too long ago that the British looked at, and for one Spitfire there's 99 people in the chain. That included cooks and cleaners and paperwork people and all that. So for every Spitfire pilot there's 99 people up the supply chain. So
wow,
that's amazing.
More questions? Surely we haven't been that informative.
Does your dual seat aircraft also have dual controls?
No, it doesn't. It's just a seat.
Actually, it was an add-on. The armor plate you removed.
Right, we removed the armor plate's partially removed, cut out and round, and has a huge back seat back there. When you're looking at it, it doesn't look like much, but it's real roomy. It's got good sized windows and you know, headphones and all that back there. So,
how about Danny?
That's our plant. That's Scott. Yeah, we talked about that a little earlier. Yeah, we do paid rides in the airplane. It's the only Corsair that I know of that's on the FAA approved rides program. So we do rides in it. It's available if any of you want to put that on your bucket list.
Are you doing any up here, or
we're not really
not
doing them officially set up.
Yeah.
We might be able to work one in here or there. The ride's $24.95. That's with the decimal point at the end, as Chuck says. But that keeps the airplane going. One of the amazing things about the Corsair, I think, is you know, everybody, the bucket list P-51. There's so many. You know, everybody loves the P-51. It's the greatest thing after World War II. Well, God, there's got to be 200 of them or so flying. And the Corsair, there's 15 or so flying. So it's pretty rare, and you can get rides in a Mustang. There's many of them out there doing rides, but this is the only one that you can do a ride in a Corsair. But the Corsairs, the prices of them have just gone up so much.
Yeah.
It's just nuts.
We won't get into prices. It makes me sick. If I could buy back every airplane I've ever sold for what I sold it for, we could have retired earlier. Anyway, you have another question, Dan?
Yeah.
I got a question for the pilot. Okay. I'm just wondering if he usually trash talks the Mustangs, and does he get into any scuffle with the Mustang pilot?
Okay, the pilot, he wants to know if you trash talk Mustangs and if you've ever got into a scuffle with a Mustang.
We have a lot of fun.
A Mustang pilot, I'm sorry.
Yeah, we fly Mustangs as well. But yeah, I mean, that's one of the fun things we get to do is you get to do some trash talking, and there may or may not be some beers involved afterwards. But yeah, so you want to do your best against your buddies.
I think the biggest advantage of a Mustang is that you can fly it with a white suit and expect it to be reasonable when you get out. And you can't do that with a Corsair.
That's true.
You're going to get oil on you somewhere, somehow. That's just, if you're not getting oil on you, you probably don't have enough oil in it.
Yeah, talk about the difference in the airplanes. I've flown a P-47 also, and had somebody ask me, which is better. They were arguing, a big group was arguing about it, and I said, well, this P-47 shot down a Mustang in the soccer wars, so that's the only thing I know of. So depends on the pilot, obviously.
How about it? Any more questions, Danny?
Yeah, he wants to know the difference in the engines in the different model Corsairs.
They're all the same. It's all a 2800. You know.
Different dash numbers.
Well, yeah. Now these are all the CB3s. Most
and
of them.
different power output.
Yeah, if you have one of the early ones, yeah, it's not going to be as powerful as the CB3s.
Now, Bill, was there not a 4360 on one model of a Corsair?
The F2G, which was what they call the corncob Corsair.
Yeah, it was a super Corsair, and I think they only made like 12 of those, or so. There's just a handful made, and of course, there's been a couple of racing. They had the 4360. They designed that to come up with something to go against the kamikazes, and in the meantime, the Bearcat came out, and a couple other things that far outdid the Super Corsair, so they stopped production.
Yeah.
We have a lady.
Why is it called Whistling Death?
I didn't hear it.
Why is it called Whistling Death?
Whistling Death.
If you look at the inlets on the oil cooler, and it's also inlets to the carburetor, and there, when you're in a dive or going high speed, it creates a whistle. And when we're flying them during the air shows, we got several of them here. I think this is the most I've seen in a long time. But you'll hear them on the pull-out. There will be a definite whistle, and it's due to the inlets and the leading edge.
It's quite impressive. It does whistle. Say again.
What's V&E on?
What's V&E?
Depends on how much guts you got, I guess.
Different ones are different. It's like Stuart's saying 355. That sounds about right. There's a little red line on there that you don't go towards, but
supposedly it would do 400 miles
do 400.
an hour.
That's level. That's up at altitude and all that. But you're not going to be indicating
no
that much when you're up at altitude. You're going to be indicating pretty low. So.
Bill, if I may, I want to talk a little bit about Dr. Bill. I want to thank you, Bill, for being a moderator all these years. It has been my duty to schedule the moderators, and I think I did a wonderful job today. I'm not trying to rush you, but anyway, I want to thank you, Bill. And
thank you. Actually, I have a lot of thanks for a lot of people because I have had an opportunity to fly some truly great airplanes, and but the main thing is I have met truly great people. And it's not people who are famous. It's people like the ones who are sitting here who share my interest. And that Paul Pobresny said it better than anybody I know. Paul always said, the airplanes got you here, but it's the people that bring you back.
Absolutely.
And we thank you all.
Absolutely. Bill? Bill is a mover and shaker in the Warburg community. He has flown so many different types of airplanes, including the B-17 you see flying overhead here. That's the EA's airplane, aluminum overcast. And I was sitting home one day, 20 years ago, and Bill called me at home, and he said, Danny, understand that you got quite a bit of radial engine time. I said, yeah, Bill, I flew him in the Air Force, and my first airliner was radial. He said, how much tail wheel time you got? My blood pressure went up because I knew where he was going. And he said, would you like to fly the B-17? And I took about a millisecond to answer that, yes, hell yes. And I did it for 20 years, and it's been a wonderful experience. Thank you, Mr. Bill.
Oh, you're welcome. Anything else that we can tell you about Corsairs? Oh, there's one, yes. Say, but you were asking about aircraft carriers. Oh,
just about all of them, I think. So.
Just about everything. That was the war to end all wars.
They pushed
remember?
a lot of stuff over. Yeah.
About 4 wars ago, that was the war that was to end all wars. Unfortunately, it didn't work.
Hundreds, I'd say. Don't really know. I know there was a lot of it done. There was a lot of the 51s, P-40s, things like that over in the Philippines and China area and everything, where they just dug big trenches and just pushed them off in there and covered them up. So there's been finds of those type of things also.
We have with us, and I believe he's in the audience, my friend from Australia. Is he here? Alan Austin?
He's at lunch.
He was here.
He's at lunch, Bill.
He got hungry. Anyway, he lives in Brisbane, which is southwest Australia. And I was just talking to him. They're still pulling all sorts of things out of New Guinea. And we're going to see some really interesting airplanes coming even now. I thought, 40 years ago that we'd found everything that could be found, but that's not true. So keep coming back, and we'll try to show you interesting stuff every time you come. And I really, on behalf of EAA and the Warbirds of America, I want to tell you how much we appreciate your being here, because if it weren't for you, it wouldn't be us. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Bill.